Oh, man. It is a dreary Wednesday afternoon, but I can tell you right now, a little Cajun food from Dudley's Cajun Cafe in Longview is just the ticket to get you all cranked up, warmed up, feeling a lot better, especially as you try to decipher what in the heck is going on with the Dallas Cowboys right now. Again, left the air last night around 6 o'clock. By 7:15, I had gone to dinner with my wife. You can't even take a break and before something big starts breaking out of Valley Ranch, which is why it's a really good thing that we got, Brandon George from the Dallas Morning News standing by right now on the Apex VIP hotline, cutting-edge training for the serious athlete, apexgo.com, because he just practically sleeps over there now. Brandon, I guess you got a cot over there at this point, don't you?
You pretty much have to have that these days with the Cowboys.
Well, I mean, how much of a surprise was it to you that the firing of Bryan came down when it did, and the fact that he was fired at all?
Well, I was surprised. I was somewhat surprised. I mean, considering how many injuries they had. Obviously, with they had 5 defensive starters lost for the season before the start of December, and obviously, I think one of our columnists today looked back at all the injuries in the NFL over the past year, and the Cowboys lost. For starters, the third most games, of any other team in the NFL. So when you look at all that, you are surprised that he gets fired. But then you look at the other hand, I think internally the Cowboys were starting to sour a little bit on Bryan. I think thought he was a little bit more bark than he was bite, and some of the schemes and philosophy at times were seen as as unsound, and just the way he used his scheme. Obviously, when he blitzed a lot in 2011. They went out and signed Brandon Carr and drafted Morris Claiborne, and then he backed off in 2012 when he thought with those signings he'd be more aggressive, and he wasn't. So I think some of those things kind of factored into this decision.
So is there the possibility then that the Cowboys are really seriously thinking about scrapping the 3-4 and going back to a 4-3?
I think it's a real possibility. I don't think it's a given, but I do think it's something they're looking at this point. From the people I've talked to, it's something they're looking into more right now, and obviously when you look at Jason Garrett's comment from last night, obviously when he says there's a philosophical difference, between Bryan and the direction they want to head in, it kind of points to that direction. So I think, you very well could see 4-3 used in Dallas for the first time. I guess it's 2004, I believe. I think 05 was the first year they had the 3-4.
Now, I know this is a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I'm guessing that this was a Jerry Jones decision, not a Jason Garrett decision, or was Jason Garrett the guy that wanted Bryan gone?
I think ultimately it was a Jerry Jones decision, like almost all of them are. But when you look at it, I think Jason was probably on board with this, just considering when Rob was hired a couple of years ago, really Rob wasn't Jason's number one choice. He brought a couple others in. Rob was one of 4 interviewed, and including, Ray Horton also came in and interviewed for the defensive back job, and also was, maybe considered this time around for the defensive coordinator job. So, I don't think that Garrett was totally on board when Rob was hired, so it was more of a Jerry Jones hire. So you can say it was probably part of both, but, ultimately, obviously, Jerry makes those final decisions.
Okay. And about the idea of calling Bryan on vacation to fire him when they just had meetings with the coaching staff I guess a couple of days earlier, that doesn't look real good for the Cowboys. That looks kind of classless.
Yeah, you can see it that way. Obviously, I think they really wanted to move quickly with this, just considering the head coaching openings around the league, and just them wanting to be able to get their candidate, the guy they want to get, a quality candidate, and to be able to hire that guy. They felt like they needed to move quickly, so they went ahead and pulled the trigger, sooner than later. And I think that's why they did that, is just because obviously with so many openings right now around the league, you don't want to be the last in line to fill that.
Sure. Brandon George from the Dallas Morning News, the pride of Nacogdoches, Texas, with us on Bryan Houston Sports Radio Live on 99.3 Talk FM. All right, so now that Ryan's gone, I guess we can assume then that his defensive staff is out of there too?
Well, I think when you look at what they're going to do, basically they're going to have a new coordinator. They'll bring in a new coordinator, and they'll let the assistants go through an interview process. They'll kind of re-interview with the new coordinator, and they'll allow these assistants to also go out and interview at other jobs. They'll grant them that if they want to do that, and Obviously, the Cowboys would have to sign off on them leaving with them being under contract if that gets to that point, but I don't think that'd be an issue. But I do think there'll probably be some more changes before it's all said and done, and even some on the offensive side. You may see some different assistants let go in the next day or two, maybe as early as this evening. I think there's going to be some more changes. And defensively, though, you really have to look at some of Rob's guys, and Matt Eberflus, the linebackers coach, the secondary coach, Jerome Henderson, obviously coached under Rob in Cleveland. Bryan Baker was kind of more of a Rob guy. He kind of came in and coached the defensive line. So some of these guys definitely have to look at as maybe, more shaky ground than others.
So what is this? Does Jerry Jones just like to fire guys over dinner just to kind of ruin their meal as well as what's the point here,
Well, I mean, from all indications everybody at Valley Ranch says Jerry's kind of been on a warpath ever since the end of the season. I mean, he is not happy, and he's got a right not to be happy after back-to-back eight seasons. They haven't been in the playoffs in 3 years. He's not pleased. And I think what this really signals is when you look out to next year, really the pressure's really going to be on Jason, because he's going to have to get this team in the playoffs next season, or he's going to be out the door, because I don't think there's going to be much more room, given much more, chain given really basically to Jason, because he's going to have the pressure on him next year, especially when they changed the defensive coordinator here and made some other coaching changes. So I think he'll have to definitely get them in the playoffs next year to survive.
Well, now, there are some people, nationally that still believe that Jason Garrett may be out of here before it's all said and done.
Yeah, I would think. I guess I would doubt that at this point. I really think this Rob Ryan's going to be the big change of the off season. I really think it's going to be the big one that Jerry kind of alluded to. I don't think you never can say never with Jerry, obviously, but at this point I would think Jason would be back, and I think he'll at least have one more shot to kind of get this thing put together and get it right in 2013.
Okay, and then there's a speculation that at some point Jerry was talking to Norv Turner about coming back. What do you know about that?
Well, I think there has been some internal talks, and Jason kind of alluded to that last week about if he'll maintain that offensive play calling duties or not going forward. But when you look at the big picture, you kind of say, well, how much do you want to change in the offseason? And Jerry really thinks his team's close, which by all the indications he really thinks they are. And so if you think, how many changes do you want? And obviously when you're changing defensive coordinators, it's going to be a pretty big change, especially if you're changing your schemes. Now, if you're changing the offensive coordinator and play caller at the same time on the other side of the ball, you got changes on both sides, pretty major changes, and then you're really looking at a lot of shakeup, and then how close is this team to competing and getting into a playoff spot. So I don't know if they'll make that change just so soon. I think maybe Jason will get him due for at least one more year to get this thing right, like I said, and just to make that many major changes in the offseason, I think would be troublesome for this team in 2013.
The only thing I would disagree with you on there is if it's Norv Turner, because it's basically the same offense, isn't it, that Jason ran under Norv when he was playing?
Yeah, certainly Norv obviously would be a wild card since they use pretty much the same offense in San Diego. But, can both those guys' egos, can they survive that? I don't know. With Norv, I mean, pretty much Jason was pretty much under Norv forever, and with Norv, feel good about working underneath Jason. I don't know. There's a lot of ifs there. So, by all indications of Norv, from what I've seen and people I've talked to, he's not too keen on coming here at this point. Now, it could work itself out and go that direction if other things don't work out for Norv, but I think this is definitely not his first choice at this point.
Okay, and then in the comments that I've read, it sounded like Jerry Jones, when he had the interview on the Fan and talked about wanting to make everybody uncomfortable, he said, I don't want to hear about injuries. I want to get back to fundamentals. Well, injuries were definitely a problem on defense. Injuries were also a major problem on offense, and that included that pitiful offensive line that he put together. So does that mean he sours on Bill Callahan, too, and is going to throw him under the bus?
Well, you could speculate that. People I've talked to at Valley Ranch, though, they seem to think that Callahan's going to be safe for at least another year, but I think they'll at least give him another year as well. But, as far as the offensive line goes, it's an area that you can say they played a little bit better later in the year in the offensive line, and I really think when you look at going forward, I think it's got to be a top priority this offseason for the Cowboys, in the draft primarily. They need to go out and draft some linemen pretty early to try to get that thing built the right way and give Tony Romo, a better chance to survive back there.
As a beat writer for the Cowboys, you live out there practically day after day after day, but I know you also hear all the speculation coming in from all over the country, and when you hear talk that maybe that Jones has visited with Mike Holmgren or somebody like that, how much do you actually chase that down, or do you just kind of dismiss some of that stuff as just being, the national stuff that people are automatically just going to assume?
Well, I mean, obviously we have three guys that cover the Cowboys, so we're all talking to different sources, typically, and sometimes it's the same source, but most of the time we try to have a variety of sources. So we're all checking with people, and if we hear something like that, we'll run it up the chain sometimes and see if anything comes out in the wash, But at times, some of these things you hear and you know pretty quickly that there's not too much to it because you've already talked to some of the hires, top executives that probably giving you an indication of what they're looking at, and it didn't even fit in the puzzle. So I think when you hear those, you kind of run them up the chain, but sometimes you don't give them much validity, I guess.
Okay, Brandon George from the Dallas Morning News covering the Cowboys. All right, so Ryan's out. Who are the possible candidates then to replace him as the defensive coordinator?
Well, you look at it, I think there's 4 or 5 guys that kind of jump off the page at you. And I mentioned one earlier with Ray Horton, obviously the former Cowboys defensive back from '89 to '92. He interviewed here 2 years ago. He was the Steelers' secondary coach when he interviewed with Jason and Jerry 2 years ago, but now he's the Arizona's defensive coordinator. Has done really well there. So I think he's a guy that is kind of an obvious candidate. Now, he is a candidate for the Arizona head coaching job, so it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out and if he'd be interested in kind of making more of a lateral move, I guess you'd say, to the Cowboys, obviously. But Arizona to Dallas is seen as a step up in a way, even as the defensive coordinator job. But obviously another guy, and Ray's a 3-4 guy, but if you go 4-3, you really have to look at a guy like maybe Monty Kiffin, who's a kind of a 4-3 master that, he just resided at USC, last month, and he did that in hopes of kind of getting an NFL job. So I think he's a guy that also can, you might want to look at as someone who could come in here. He ran that Tampa 2 scheme for so many years and did so well around the league. And obviously Lovie Smith, a guy, with the Texas roots, that if he doesn't get another head coaching job, maybe he considers coming in as a defensive coordinator for the Cowboys. Maybe he'd be a good fit here. I think someone like Lovie or even Romeo Crennel, the former Chiefs coach, might be a good fit with somebody like Jason. When you consider, Romeo's a guy that players really like to play for, and I think that his style would kind of fit under Jason Garrett a little bit too. So someone like that, or Lovie, and then obviously another guy in Buffalo, Dave Wannstedt, obviously got the ties here with Jimmy Johnson there. And I don't think he can ignore him. I think that Jerry's really, thinks really highly of Dave. So I think you can't just kind of totally take him out of the picture.
So right now it's wide open though as to who they might bring in.
Yeah, it pretty much is wide open at this point. It'd be interesting to see where they go first with their moves, and I think you'll see that sooner than later next coming days. I think they'll definitely have some news come out about who they're going to talk to.
And what about news as far as about unloading some of these players?
Well, I think that'll shake out once they get the coaching staff set. I think they'll want to get the coaches in here and get them in place and kind of go from there to get some kind of a different eyes on this thing, and when they get in some new coaches. And I think, but there is a possibility, they're going to unload some of these players. Doug Free's a guy that could be let go, and they might move on from him. But if they do that, they're really going to have to look at probably drafting a right tackle pretty high, if not the first round, first or second round, to try to get a right tackle in here. Because I don't know if Jeremy Farnell would be a guy that's going to be ready to automatically come in and be a full-time starter. He did improve as the year went on, but he's not a proven guy yet. So, but he is a guy that could be unloaded. There's some speculation about Miles Austin, but then, you look at they don't have much depth behind Miles Austin, and really, where do you go from there? I don't know if they'll let him go or not. And then, on the other side of the ball, you got, Jay Ratliff. He missed 10 games this year. Do you want to bring him back another year? They just gave him a contract extension, so they have to battle that and how much money they'd lose, moving forward and putting on the books in future years. So they have a lot of things to look at as far as what to do. But most of their starters are re-signed for next year. Only 3 starters off of this team this year that aren't re-signed for next year. So the big one they'll have to make a decision on is Anthony Spencer, whether they'll re-sign him. They may not have the money to be able to do that. And if they go in a direction of moving to a 4-3, they may just let Spencer walk and kind of use the players they have in-house and then maybe bring in a strong side linebacker to try to go to that 4-3 defense.
And they don't have a lot of room with the cap, do they?
No, they're from anywhere from like 18 to 20 million over the cap right now, and that's with about 43 or 44 players signed, and so that's not even a full roster signed, and not including your draft picks you're going to have to sign when you bring them in here. So they're going to have to do some maneuvering there to get room, and obviously one of the things they're going to do in all likelihood is re-sign Tony Romo to a long-term contract, which will free up several $1 million on the salary cap there. So that's one thing they'll do. They'll restructure some contracts. Probably Brandon Carr's contract will probably be restructured to get some money from that as well. So I think they'll do some things. No, they'll have some money to spend, but it won't be a whole lot. And that's the thing they have with Anthony Spencer, that is how much money they'll have to spend. And he's obviously going to command anywhere from $8 to $10 million a year, especially with the season he had this past year.
Well, man, I hope you tricked out your truck and everything so that you can just sleep right there, maybe have a kitchen right there in the back of it, everything.
Yeah, that's the way you got to do it, man. You got to live out there. So well, I got these 2 little kids, so I try to get home as much as I can. So
you're a good man, Brandon George. We appreciate you coming on with us. Thanks for giving us an update.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Good talking to you, buddy. All right, Brandon George from the Dallas Morning News, the pride of Nacogdoches, Texas, covering the Cowboys on Bryan Houston Sports Radio Live on 99.3 Talk FM. Back in a moment.